Gender-locked content in video games has always bothered me. Now, I actually haven't heard as many people complain about this as much as I would have suspected, so I'm going to do my best to describe what gender-locked content in video games is, along with showing some examples. As straightforward as the term may sound, I feel like it's best if we start off with a simple question. What is an avatar character in a video game? Most may think that it's merely the character you play as in the game, but that definition is incorrect. That would be calling characters like Mario or Dante avatar characters, which they clearly aren't. An avatar character is a character who is supposed to represent you in a video game, the way you immerse yourself, so to speak. They tend to follow 4 simple traits. The player is able to name them, although most do have an official name just for convenience. They are either completely silent or have a very simplified personality. Their gender can be chosen, if not the character is completely androgynous and never referred to using gendered pronouns, and you play as them throughout the game as your default player character. So while there are certain characters that fit into some of these traits, such as Link or Ness or Joker, they aren't avatar characters because they don't fit into all of the traits. Correct examples of avatar characters would be Robin and Corrin from Fire Emblem, Kara from Undertale, or the Villager from Animal Crossing. Genderlock content comes into play when you're prevented from accessing certain content within a game due to the gender of your avatar character. Now, a skeptic might say, well, you should just play as the opposite gender then. That's a horrible solution. While some are fine with this idea, many, including myself, are not. The goal of an avatar character is to immerse yourself in the game. Being called by the incorrect pronoun can immediately take you out of the experience. I'll go for a more tame example before we get into anything big. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is a spin-off of the original Pokemon game series. In it, you play as a human who has been transformed into a Pokemon and must now traverse a new world filled with dungeons in order to get back home. The human-turned Pokemon you play as in the game is your avatar character, intended to be you. Immersion. In order to determine which Pokemon you play as, you need to answer a personality quiz at the beginning of the game, and depending on your personality type, and after selecting your gender, you're assigned which Pokemon you play as. However, in the first 2 games, there is a major issue. You guessed it, certain Pokemon are gender-locked. Playing as either Meowth, Machop, Cyndaquil, Phanpy, Shinx, or Riolu are exclusive to males, whilst playing as Eevee, Chikorita, Skitty, or Vulpix are exclusive to females. This has always bothered me significantly. There are Pokemon in the games that can only be one gender, such as Frostlass or Gallade, but none of the ones in Mystery Dungeon fall into that category. All can be either or. My only assumption is that they were categorized like this due to either looking masculine or feminine, or being popular with a certain gender. Eevee is literally designed to be neutral. How do you gender lock that? It's just something that's annoyed me for a long time. Luckily, all of the more recent games have removed any form of gender locking, so that's not much of a worry anymore. What is a worry is the Fire Emblem series, which is going to be the primary gender locking example in this video going forward. The games have only recently started to improve their issue with gender locked content, but oh boy, it's got a long way to go. Take Fire Emblem Awakening, for instance. In said game, you create your own avatar character and fight alongside many medieval and fantasy characters in order to win a war. If certain criteria are met, you can have little support conversations with your teammates, and if you reach a high enough support level, can even marry them. However, certain support conversations are changed depending on whether you're playing as a male or female character. The best example of this being one of the main characters, Chrom, an exalted prince who, despite being somewhat of a dork deep down, will stop at nothing to save his kingdom and the people he cares about. If you're playing as a male, your support conversations with him are deep and meaningful, developing him as a character and furthering your bond with him, all the while making you wonder why he isn't romanceable as a male character. And if you're playing as a female character, you don't get those deep and meaningful conversations with Chrom. Instead, you get a bunch of scenes of Chrom being a dorky goofball, doing a bunch of things, including accidentally walking in on your character while she's naked. If you're female, the game actively prevents you from seeing the genuine heart-to-heart conversations held between Chrom and the male avatar in favor of having anime rom-com shenanigans. Whereas if you're male, you do get these deep and meaningful conversations, but cannot romance Chrom. This is actually the reason my sister, during her playthrough of the game, didn't end up with Chrom. Despite really liking the character, she was made uncomfortable and disappointed by the weird support conversations. This issue expands into the gender-locking issue that Fire Emblem is now known for. Same-sex romance options. There were absolutely zero same-sex romance options in Fire Emblem Awakening, which a lot of people were really annoyed with. This is also gender-locking content due to the fact that many of the characters can only be romanced if the player is the opposite gender. This was quote-unquote fixed in the next title, Fire Emblem Fates. Yes! Intelligent Systems finally added same-sex romance options. One for each gender! Amazing representation! You've really outdone yourself! If you're male, you can romance Niles, an overly promiscuous criminal with no ounce of subtlety in his body. And if you're female, you can romance Rajat, a loner who also happens to be a dark mage. The only same-sex romance options are a literal criminal and a foregoer of black magic. Probably not the best look. Being a male of questionable sexuality, I actually married Niles during my first playthrough, as he interested me, looked cool, and none of my female party members interested me in that way. Also, some of them were my step-siblings, that would be really weird. Niles didn't do it for me. I do really like him as a character. He's witty, funny, and pretty damn cool. But I didn't really feel too great about him as a romantic partner. He was just a little much. The fact that there's only one same-sex romance option per gender makes it really annoying. It's unfortunate, as there were other male characters whom I wish I could have romanced, but couldn't because of the dumb gender locks on romanceable partners. Someday, Caden. Someday. And as I said before, play as the other gender is not a fix for this issue, because with games like this you want to immerse yourself, you want to feel as if you're part of the world. As somebody who's biologically male and identifies as male, it would really diminish my immersion to have the character who's supposed to represent me both look and be referred to as a girl. I've also heard people say that the reason for the lack of same-sex romance options is that the pairings in the game are supposed to have children, and that having each character be romanceable by somebody of the same sex would limit your amount of characters due to the lack of offspring. My argument? Fantasyland! This game takes place in a world where magic exists, I can turn into a dragon, and my brother is a samurai dressed as a lobster. And you're telling me that adoption, surrogacy, or some sort of magic spell to allow same-sex reproduction is out of the question. That's ridiculous. In the most recent game, Fire Emblem Three Houses, they've added quite a few more same-sex romance options. If you're female. If you're playing as the female avatar, you have a total of 5 options for same-sex romance partners, one of which even being the main antagonist. If you're playing as a male avatar, you get a total of 2. 2 same-sex romance options for males. You do get one more if you purchase a $30 expansion pass, whereas every single female option is available in the base game. As for the male options in the base game, you have a guy whose primary character trait is being sleepy and the secondary antagonist. And as totally badass as Yuritsa is, his ending is kind of weird because it starts off with him talking about how much he wants to kill you, but he also kind of wants you to kill him, and that you want to fight to the death together, and it's kind of masochistic and kinky in a way. But I mean, he does actually mention that he loves you, which is more than some other characters can say. What is also confusing is that Edelgard, one of the titular three-house leaders as seen on the game's box art, is romanceable as a female avatar, yet the other 2 house leaders, Dimitri and Claude, cannot be romanced by the male avatar. This upset a lot of people, especially considering how Claude acts, with some even claiming that Claude is bi-coded. And as happy as I was with Best Girl Bernadetta, I must say that it did disappoint me that I was unable to even consider going with Claude. It's to the point where there are fan-made modifications for Fire Emblem Three Houses that add more same-sex romance options, but that doesn't make up for it, considering it's unofficial. Mods are no excuse for what's in the base game. It's very clear that, as much as people claim games like Fire Emblem are progressing with things like gender-locking content and same-sex romance options, it is still a very prevalent issue. Gender-locking content should not be as common as it is. Actively refusing the player in-game content due to the gender of their avatar character is a very annoying issue to deal with. How can it be fixed, though? Well, I think it's quite obvious that choosing which gender you want to play as should be cosmetic, and not affect the gameplay in any way, shape, or form. A male player should have access to the same content as a female player, and vice versa. It should be the same thing as naming your avatar character, only there for immersion and customization. These options should not be decisive of what content the player has access to. You're not going to be locked out of certain content in a game because of your name, so why should you be for your gender? As for romance options, I feel like having one or two same-sex romance options isn't going to cut it anymore. In my personal opinion, I feel like every character who can be romanced by one gender should be romanceable by the other. A skeptic might argue that a character like Chrom, who canonically gets married to a woman and has a daughter in the game, or Sylvain, who is constantly trying to impress the ladies, would not be able to be paired with a male character because they are, quote-unquote, canonically straight. How wrong you are, my friend! Chrom getting married and having a daughter only confirms that he is canonically attracted to women. It does not rule out the possibility of him also being attracted to men. Sylvain focusing on his attraction towards women also does not mean he doesn't hold any attraction towards men. People can have a preference and not be straight. The assumption people have is a major issue. Why do people assume that characters are straight by default? I personally feel like if the solutions I mentioned were normalized, then gender-locking content would be seen far less frequently than it surprisingly is. And while there are certainly bigger issues, I feel like this is the biggest issue revolving around gender in the world of gaming, and it is an issue that needs to go away.